I enjoy a good Japanese-style dungeon crawling game, and there's a new one called Cladun Returns This is Sengoku now available. But is this a dungeon that's worth crawling into, or is this game's hero getting slayed before we even enter? Cladun Returns is the third game in the Cladun series. It is a dungeon crawler with a little bit of differences from your standard one, where you get to create a character of a variety of different classes that will affect the spells as well as the stats progression as you're leveling up. There's a good amount of weapon types to select from swords, hammers, bows, and arrows, and a plethora of moves that you'll get to learn for each of these weapon types as you progress through the game. The game story revolves around your character and spirits which are trying to reincarnate. For one reason or another, they're unable to do so because they left some task unfulfilled during their life. However, you go chapter to chapter helping different spirits, including some from Japanese history, though unfortunately it doesn't do a great job of really exploring the historical aspect of the game other than, hey, here's a figure from Japanese history and you're helping them, and they get 2 lines of dialogue and then you're moving on to the next character. But still, the story progresses nicely as you're going basically as a means to get to the next chapter and the next set of dungeon levels. Unlike a lot of typical dungeon crawlers where you have randomly generated floors for you to explore, the levels and dungeon that you explore here in the main story as well as the EX stages are set. However, there is still random generation for the game's hardest dungeons that you end up unlocking late in the game once you end up completing the main story. Also a tad bit different is it's not really kind of a turn-based style of attacking in the dungeons, where you would attack, then your enemy gets to attack, and so on and so forth. Here's a much more action-oriented battle system where you have much more freedom of movement to get around enemies and get away from certain attacks. This also can sometimes be difficult to pin an enemy down exactly where you want them to, but for the most part it was an enjoyable battle system. A big part of the Cladun series is the magic circle. Basically, you have one character that takes the role of the Lord, and you have vessels that you're able to fill out on kind of a grid. They will end up kind of becoming your defense, as well as boosting other stats while you're in battle, and you unlock more spots to have more of the vessels as you're going through, including unlocking spirits from the different dungeons that become your vessels, or you can just straight up create them with whatever classes and design you would like them to have. You're able to equip relics to also affect different statuses, such as the amount of magic points you have or the amount of tact you're able to do. Though some of the spots in the magic circle may end up having a downgrade or two, such as certain characters in certain spots may have less health, though you can do stuff that kind of counteract this as you go through. There's also the fortress building aspect where basically you get stones that you can put together in order to form floors of a tower that will end up boosting stats like defense and attack as well. It's also one of those games that may start off a bit easy, but there are some pretty big leaps in difficulty as you get farther in. I would make it to a new chapter and a new floor, and while I was able to easily complete the previous chapter and floor, the next one ended up kicking my butt, usually leading me to either have to buy better equipment, level up a little bit by redoing older stages, or better rearranging my magic circle so that I was able to take on the challenge. Instead of progressing floor by floor in a dungeon, you have every one of the stages as part of the chapters being their own self-contained area. Beating the stage will then send you back to the town where you've unlocked the next stage, and then you go back into the dungeon and so on and so forth. Because of this, there's not a whole lot of penalty other than losing a lot of the items that you ended up gathering during a particular stage if you end up game overing. Most levels are relatively short and sometimes do contain puzzles for you to solve, usually involving switches to hit, or you have to defeat certain enemies in order to unlock gates in the right order to eventually make it to that floor's particular exit. There's treasure chests scattered throughout and some other areas which are a bit more difficult, and every so often you'll have to deal with a boss as well. Every chapter you complete, you unlock the EX version of the chapter with tougher levels, tougher enemies for you to face off with. There's a total of 10 chapters with 50 levels for the story, and an additional 50 extra levels for you to take on, as well as the bonus dungeons afterwards, which is really where you're going to spend a bulk of your time. The main story itself isn't particularly long, but when you factor in all the extra dungeons and the bonus dungeons, there's a decent amount here. There is a small multiplayer component as well that you end up unlocking late in the game, so it's more of a bonus feature than an actual main feature, and this involves a cooperative play for the hardest randomly generated dungeons as well as a versus mode where you're competing with friends for treasures and such. From the technical side of things though, Cladun ran fine. I didn't run any major glitching, crashing, or slowdown of any sort. It is available now on PS4, Vita, and PC for $39.99, and it does have a full trophy list in Platinum on the PS4 and Vita. Overall, if you like the sprite-based or retro-style dungeon crawling games, this one's worth checking out. The action-oriented battle system is quite nice, and even with its relatively short story mode, the extras after the main story are worth checking out, especially if you like it where you have a random dungeon that's really difficult. Even if you have a maxed out character, you have that included here. With everything said, I'm going to be giving Cladun Returns This is Sengoku a 7 out of 10. But anyway guys, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.